Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I am aware that railroads have its fair share of spooks and uncanny aspects, especially when it comes to paranormal occurrences or shady stories. I am curious about the horror and paranormal aspects of railroads in other parts of the world. In my place, railroading has its own share of paranormal stories. I'm not working at a railroad company yet, but I had my share of paranormal stories told by other railroaders, train drivers, station masters, etc. Here's one of the examples. I had by myself. Be me. Be friends with the station master of a big transit station. Sometimes chill and hang out at his office. One day, chilling as usual at the station master's office at midnight, talking about random things with fellow station staff. The office has a security camera monitor. One shows the situation of the underpass tunnel of the station. When I looked closely, I saw a figure of a woman in white dress. The woman standing firmly in the far end of the underpass tunnel. When I try to get a closer look at the woman floats into the wall, literally floating and disappearing into the tunnel's wall. Told my friend, the station master, that I got to catch the last commuter train. Still 2 stations away. Screw that, I ain't gonna stay here for much longer at night. Walking to the station's platform, passing the underpass tunnel's stairway. Look below. WTF. Saw that woman figures again passing the tunnel, floating. Nope. .jpg. The train arrived, instantly jumped inside. The doors closed, and I swear I could hear a woman's laughter in a sinister way. Not able to sleep well that night. Pick related. It's the station. So any of you got some spooky stories from the railway in your area or hometown? Another one. Be me. Chilling with the railway company's staff on his day off. Talking about some bull. Then he mentioned railway crossing demons. What? So basically, each year at a certain railway crossing through the city, there will always be fatal accidents and casualties involving cars or motorbikes crashed against speeding trains. Usually the other driver or rider has warned the doomed victim that the portal is already down. But the victim always seems to ignore the warnings. Not even whistles from railway crossing guard staff could work. It always ended with the same demise, getting hit by an oncoming speeding train. Locals told an urban legend that it was the work of a deaf demon. Kind of demons or ghosts that inhabit railway crossings and demand blood to be spilled each year on the particular railway crossing. So each year there will always be someone killed at the railway crossing, almost always due to getting hit by a speeding train. They would deafen the chosen victim, making them unaware of any warnings at the crossings. Not even visual warnings could work. It's like the chosen victim would fall into some kind of trance to their demise. Each year it is always happening. My face when there's already fatalities at various railway crossings in my city.
Be me. 2018. Crashing at my friend's apartment one particular night. Drink and talking. Her apartment is next to a local train station. Just when I'm sitting on the balcony to light some cigarettes, I heard the sound of an oncoming train. Check the clock. 1:33 a.m. Strangely, there's still train passes at this time. Ask my friend if there's additional train schedules at this time. She said no, the last train passed through at 41 a.m. and the last freight train passed through at 1:15 a.m. She checked the balcony and she indeed also heard the sound of an oncoming freight train. My face when there's no freight train in sight, although the sound is very clear and very close. Both of us are not sleeping until the morning, talking about weird things happening near her apartment.
Think of railroads. If they are electrified, the most immediate area around them is highly magnified. Many claim magnetism and radiation are 2 key aspects to materialize that which do not exist in our own dimension. Now consider another thing. Most railroads are old. And along the path where the train travels is literally a rotten soul grave rat that has been accumulating kills for decades. Millions of animals ranging from flies and birds to large mammals and humans have met their end there. And the last moments before their gory deaths were terrifying and violent. I worked the night shift as a technician for railroads, both inner city and rural. The ambient sound along the tracks is unpleasant. Like a subtle feeling that something is not right. I've personally had quite a few paranormal experiences. ranging from whisper-like sounds to full-on screams of agony in the distance. Objects like dead branches and boulders along the tracks moving for unexplained reasons. Another scary but non-paranormal thing is all the gore. Found plenty of carcasses of dead animals and even human bones. Lucky no recently killed humans yet. However, the word among colleagues is that usually everyone gets to see at least one dead corpse during their career. Needless to say, I really want to quit, but the salary is too good.
Live in London, alone for the most part, next to these train tracks. On the ground floor of an apartment block, and my window oversees the train tracks, which are raised up above, and there's an underpass that people can walk on. People on the train can see into my window quite clearly, but are far enough that you can just about make out their faces. Every now and then the train stops on the tracks adjacent to my window and I can see the passengers. It's 4 a.m., dead of night. You can only hear my typing when I see the light of the train outside my window. Find it strange that it doesn't sound like the usual train with multiple carriages. This is just one carriage. See this pale figure staring into my window for what seems like 5 seconds before I stand straight up and walk towards the window. I go over and I open the curtain a bit more and see a whole carriage of people. I don't immediately freak out, but in a split second I realize they are all staring at me. Immediately start freaking out and I close the curtains, but those cheap Amazon brand curtains don't close the entire way, so I just sit down on the floor and look the other way towards my computer. I can hear the carriage moving slowly. I don't hear any other sort of mechanical train noise, just the carriage going over the tracks. I walk out of my room into the kitchen and the carriage again has stopped and the people are staring out of the carriage right at me, with the original figure from the first time again staring. I ran out of the kitchen into the empty room next to my bathroom. And I just go in the bathroom, close the door and listen for the carriage movement. I can hear the slow mechanical noise slowly ticking over and I have no upstairs. I'm on the ground floor. I spend maybe 5 to 10 minutes on my phone and I look at train times to my nearest station thinking maybe there's a delay, but there are no trains running at this time. Go outside and look again and the train is gone.
When I was around 8 or 9, I went out with my dad to collect some mushrooms in a nearby forest. We're Russian, and that's not uncommon here. We rode a train, Elektrichka, one station down route and disembarked at a tiny village right by the forest edge. Everything was fine, and we filled up 2 baskets with mushrooms. It was also around that time that the sky clouded over, and my dad said we should probably head home before it starts raining. But instead of turning back to where the village and the train station was, he started leading me deeper into the forest. We kept going for a while, probably no more than about 20 minutes, but to me as a kid that felt like hours. Eventually we came across some train tracks, but I instantly recognized those weren't the same tracks we rode out of town on. They seemed abandoned and overgrown. I asked my dad where we were, and he just said we're taking a shortcut. I'm a little kid, and that's my dad, so I didn't question it. We crossed the tracks and kept going through some fields. We ended up on the edge of some town, but it didn't look like my hometown. The streets were completely empty, and I didn't recognize the street layout for quite a while. Eventually, we did end up on a street I knew, but again, something seemed off, and everything was empty. Instead of going straight home via the regular path, my dad took me through some weird perpendicular side streets which I knew, and still know, don't connect to our home street. But we did somehow ended up on our home street, and on the opposite end of where we should have, even if the streets did somehow curve around the right way. Map for reference. The weather suddenly cleared up, and there were plenty of people around again. We returned home with our mushrooms, and I never spoke about it again. To this day, I'm 100% convinced my dad just took a shortcut through some sort of alternative reality. I'd ask him about it, but I haven't been in contact with him in 2 decades.
So I thought /x/ would like this story because at this point I've mostly gotten over it. This takes place when I was a kid in the mid-90s with my parents overseas in Spain for a vacation. It was called Matilda Ride. We were between a major city in a smaller, yet still kinda big town in central Spain. The town was basically an oldish mining town that was still somewhat going strong, but was slowly falling off the map. We decided to stop off in the town as it has a few more American things we recognize, and as little kids me and my sister don't want to eat the good-ass food over there and instead want chicken fingers. In the town we look around for a bit and I spotted a Thomas the Train looking thing on the side of a large mountainish hill with kids lined up outside of it. Begged my parents to go, so they decided to split up, my mother taking me and my dad taking my sister. It was called Matilda Ride. It really was something like Matilda's Riders or something, but horribly translated into English. It was a small poorly made version of James, sort of like the picture I posted with this, but was slightly faded red so it looked pink. The train was on the tracks of an old minecart system that was barely big enough to fit the engine, all the cars onto it, often making me get scared that the side of the engine would crash into the walls of the mine. It didn't, however, but it was obvious the kids were all on edge when we entered the ride. The cart was too small for an adult to sit in it, so many of the parents stood on the outside for the engine to get going. It had a voice box in each cart saying things in Spanish, then in English, things like, "Matilda goes through the magical tunnel to find her friends," and "Beware. Danger is around the corner," but all in a slightly gargled manner because of the voice box's age. So I thought /x/ would like this story because at this point I've mostly gotten over it. This takes place when I was a kid in the mid-90s with my parents overseas in Spain for a vacation. It was called Matilda Ride. We were between a major city in a smaller, yet still kinda big town in central Spain. The town was basically an oldish mining town that was still somewhat going strong, but was slowly falling off the map. We decided to stop off in the town as it has a few more American things we recognize, and as little kids me and my sister don't want to eat the good-ass food over there and instead want chicken fingers. In the town we look around for a bit and I spotted a Thomas the Train looking thing on the side of a large mountainish hill with kids lined up outside of it. Begged my parents to go, so they decided to split up, my mother taking me and my dad taking my sister. It was called Matilda Ride. It really was something like Matilda's Riders or something, but horribly translated into English. It was a small poorly made version of James, sort of like the picture I posted with this, but was slightly faded red so it looked pink. The train was on the tracks of an old minecart system that was barely big enough to fit the engine, all the cars onto it, often making me get scared that the side of the engine would crash into the walls of the mine. It didn't, however, but it was obvious the kids were all on edge when we entered the ride. The cart was too small for an adult to sit in it, so many of the parents stood on the outside for the engine to get going. It had a voice box in each cart saying things in Spanish, then in English, things like, "Matilda goes through the magical tunnel to find her friends," and "Beware. Danger is around the corner," but all in a slightly gargled manner because of the voice box's age. After that incident most of us were full on crying. Some kids vomited from crying so much, and others were having a hard time breathing from all the wheezing they were doing. The conductor of the train quickly tries to calm us down by moving on to the next segment rather than just getting us all out of there ASAP, but once he realizes that it won't work, he just skips the remaining 2 areas and leads us out. The conductor, 2 workers, and a few others usher the mother of the child inside a little office in one of the tunnels. As far off in the distance ambulance sirens are heard. My mom takes me out of there as fast as she can to the area she said she'd meet my father back up at. After about 15 minutes of waiting they return and we leave after my dad gets me chicken tenders. Not even trying to joke here, that's literally what he did to calm me down. As we were getting in the car to go back to our hotel, I looked over to see the ambulance bringing the kid in and noticing him cough harshly, so he was still alive. The blood seemed to be coming from his arm, so it's safe to assume he lived from all of this rather than dying right there in the train car. Must have passed out instead and been mistaken as dead. I've tried my hardest to look this up so bad, but every mention of Matilda Ride I get is either some random things about the movie Matilda or a ride from Disney or something. I'm certain it closed down because of it, else it would have been featured on some clickbait article or something by now.
Hey, X, have you ever felt as if certain people show up at the most peculiar and uncanny times? When I was younger, my mom passed away. My dad was devastated for months after the fact and to cope had buried himself in work. So, when summer rolled around he decided to take me for a week to our summer house in Maine to get some rest. The trip was largely uneventful, except for me meeting one of his neighbors, an older guy with beige khakis and a blue button-down. He knew my name and had a long conversation with me on the dock about life, God, family, etc. All while I was only 13 at the time. It always stuck out in my memory because honestly it was the most comforting thing to happen to me that whole summer and helped me move on. Last year, my dad got sick and was admitted to the hospital. I took the Green Line through Boston to get to the medical center, and while I was sitting on the train I saw an old man, wearing a blue button-down and beige khakis, as well as a black overcoat on top. I immediately thought of the old man in Maine, but I didn't think too much of it, figuring it was just some stranger riding home from work on the subway station. However, 2 stops before mine, he got up and walked past me and patted my back with his hand. After exiting the train, he turned, looked back at me through the window, and smiled. My dad passed away 2 weeks later after a long battle with lung cancer, and the face of the old man has become a mental fixation for me since then. I swear I saw him again last month on a bus in my hometown, but he was sitting at the front and I never saw his face. So it may very well have been a stranger. I'm likely just attaching a person's face to the grief and pain I feel, seeing him in places that don't make sense. It could also have just been stress-induced. The week I visited my old man was one of the worst weeks in my life, and it makes sense that I'd see something that reflects that. Whatever. Thanks for the talk, old man.
Story time of something I experienced. Me and a friend had taken a trip to Japan. We bought an unlimited pass on the bullet train and basically visited a new city or town every day until our vacation was over, and we had to fly back. We of course started in Tokyo and ended up in Kanda, a district of Tokyo known as the Book District. Anyway, we arrived in Kanda late afternoon and scouted out a hotel to stay in for the night. We picked one. It was located under a highway that was on stilts above the main street. I cannot remember the name of the hotel. For starters, this hotel was pretty eerie, not old or anything, but it smelled like a hospital, and the elevators had those small rectangular windows that had the steel wire running through the glass. Also, the walls in the corridors were that easy to wipe down plastic sheet. So I am pretty sure it was a converted mental hospital or something of the like. We got to our room, had a view of the highway where there was a large neon Nippon spark plugs billboard or something like that. It had gotten dark outside and started storming, thunder and lightning, high winds. My friend wanted to go get the subway back to Shibuya, to go drink at a small sports bar. We had made friends with the owner earlier that day. I was tired, so I stayed at the hotel. After a while it was starting to get late and I was worried he had gotten lost, so I went out to search for him. I had nearly gotten to the subway station in Kanda when I saw him coming towards me. Great, didn't have to go to Shibuya and track him down. We started walking back to the hotel, which was a few blocks away, when a person walked out of a side alley in front of us and started walking the way we were going. After a few minutes he turned and went down another side alley. Couple minutes later the same thing happened again, then he turned and went down another side alley. I could make out that it was a key. After a minute or two the same thing happened again. A random guy appeared from a side alley walking in front of us down a street, then turned off down another side alley. This time it was just before we got to the main street where the hotel was. We were kinda laughing to each other because of the randomness of the side street appearing person. Anyway, we looked across the street to where the hotel was, except it wasn't there. It was an establishment of some kind, like any store, shop front, but lights off, and clearly was not the hotel. Kind of confused, we went up and down the main street thinking we had exited further up or down from the hotel. We were seriously scouring this street for ages, but could not find the hotel. It was still storming like hell. We were soaked through and puzzled. This is when it got weird. A woman stepped out from a side alley onto the main street pavement in front of us. She was wearing very old Japanese garments that looked like they belonged in a museum. She had one of those straw hats and a straw or paper umbrella, not sure what the old ones were made from. She had long gray-white bangs of hair coming from under the hat down to about her stomach. She stopped dead in front of us, facing us, and balanced the umbrella with great skill on her shoulder as she outreached her arms and placed her hands flat against our chests. Her fingers were very long and bony, long sharp fingernails too, and her skin was the color of bleached bone. She then said something in Japanese, I'm guessing. At this point I said sorry. She seemed surprised at my voice and lifted her head up to look at me and said in perfect English, "Oh, you are not Asian. I expected you to be. I have been waiting for you for a long time." She then said something else in Japanese, I'm guessing, and just walked into the side alley again. Me and my friend were pretty confused and were almost held in place by some force. After a minute or two we moved to look down the alley and she was gone. Thing is, I cannot remember what her face looked like it's blocked from my memory. We turned around to start walking again, and there across the street was our hotel. For all intents and purposes, with the guy that kept walking out of the side streets in front of us earlier. In hindsight, it seemed like some kind of time loop. Then the old woman was just extreme. Anyone ever experienced anything like this? I have more questions than answers to my experience. I have read somewhere it's called marking. That she marked us for something.
Coming home from work. Hop on the subway. Waiting for the train. Someone in a poncho is standing on the opposite line. It's not raining hard, but still a little, but a poncho, really? I can't see a face. Appears to be looking right at me. My train comes. I get on. I get nice and settled and get out my cell phone to play some games. As the train whizzes by a station, I see the same dude. What the hell? It can't be. Shrug it off as me being tired. Happens again. This time he is looking out of what looks like an abandoned building near the tracks. Pretty spooked at this point. Finally reach my destination. Promptly get out of the station and start walking to my house. From across the street I see a shadow on the wall of a building. Shaped like the poncho thing I kept seeing. I freeze a bit. It looks like it is starting to come off the wall. I book it and run home. I glance behind me. Looks like it's still following in the dimly lit walls. Keep running. Made it home safe. Feels like a weird night though, so who knows?
Could you give a rough sketch of it? We could see if there are any entities related to it.
Just imagine someone wearing a poncho, dude. That's what I saw at first, like a real human being just in a poncho. The second part was weird. It was like a reflection but as a shadow on a wall. It had human movement and all. The only thing aside from the shadow stuff is that obviously normal people can't be on the opposite train line and still make it to where I got off that quickly. Unless they were on my train. Which it wasn't. Also, I'm fairly certain shadows don't bolt after people.
The incident that I'm about to narrate happened when I was still an elementary school student. During those days, I regularly used trains to travel to and back from the school. One-way trip took up to 30 minutes. So, naturally, I found myself drowning in boredom during the journey. Usually I, my sister and my friend, minus 3 of us, would travel together to the school. But there were times when they were involved in club activities, and I travelled all alone back from school. So during such a time when I was travelling alone back from school, I came across this creepy incident. The outside of the train was completely dark because of the winter season. I was mindlessly gazing at the dark landscape through the window. Just like always, I was in the first car of the train and was gazing outside at the dark scenery. A while later, I came up with this funny game to kill time. It was choose a particular person being reflected in the glass, then turn back and find that person inside the train. I immediately started picking people with peculiar features and searched for them inside the train. It was a simple game, but I enjoyed it. After a while of playing, I saw a tall guy with glasses. He was taller than everyone on the train, and this particular feature made him stand out from the other people. I wondered why I didn't notice such a characteristic person sooner. He might have boarded the train at the last station, I thought. I turned back to search for that person, but much to my surprise, I couldn't find him anywhere among the crowd. Such a tall person should be easily findable in the crowd, right? That's why I turned again and again to search for that person, but he wasn't there. He even stopped reflecting in the window glass after some time. At first I thought it could be my imagination, but now I think I certainly saw a man who was only visible in the glass, and maybe he wasn't present inside the train.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.